Welcome to Faith Matters. My name is Keith Hitchman. Faith Matters is a programme for Bay TV where we look at current affairs and issues through the prism of faith and belief. This is a special 1 hour programme where we have in the studio today as our guests members of Liverpool's Open Minds group. Welcome. Just introduce yourselves and say a little bit about who you are.
Well, my name's Mark and I'm a trainee counsellor.
My name's Ed. I'm involved with education of university students in medicine and social work.
And I'm Martin and I'm a freelance writer.
Okay, and just tell us a little bit about the Open Minds group, how it started, where you meet, how long you've been going. You know, is it a bit like the Illuminati? You know, can anyone join or?
Yeah, anyone can join. We meet every 2 weeks at House Cafe on Bold Street in Liverpool, and there's an online group which will tell everybody where, exactly the dates and the times, which is called the It Lad Walker group, which you can find on Facebook. So we meet about 11 a.m. on Wednesdays on Bold Street, and we just talk for a few hours. Open-mindedly about the big issues.
And do you have an agenda, or you just?
There's no agenda. We tend towards the spiritual explanations rather than the materialistic explanations, but everything's up for grabs and debate. Yeah.
Okay, are you spiritual people? Would you describe yourself as?
I think we're kind of spiritual seekers, really. I mean, I class myself as a spiritual seeker, like Martin said, just like looking at the bigger questions and trying to find some answers openly and honestly, and anything's on the table. There's no sharp intakes of breath as to kind of what people say. Nobody's judged about kind of the conclusions that they come to.
I think I would add to that we do like to ground what we say in some kind of practical science, if possible. So you will often get one of us will step in and be devil's advocate if someone's going off on one in terms of spiritual beliefs that maybe are just too far-fetched.
Okay, so it's a spiritual group, but also a kind of scientific group as well. Encompasses both angles.
Yeah, and also political, cultural, anything really that's important in people's lives. But originally we did come together to look at sort of strange anomalies around consciousness. The question, is there life after death? Is there any evidence of things like reincarnation or telepathy? And just trying to piece together a philosophy of that would sort of bring meaning to mysterious areas of life. And I think that generally people come with questions that they haven't been able to talk about or share with other people, and suddenly you can, because everyone gets a fair hearing, really. And a lot of people used to come with sort of strange experiences that they found it difficult to talk about. Precognitions, strange dreams, and things like that. So I think that was all the original kind of stuff, but now it's sort of evolved into political stuff, and but in a very open-minded way and very vibrant way, I think.
It's probably fair to say that we all found some common interest through a particular book that a friend of ours wrote some years ago, and that book was actually called Is There Life After Death?
And who was that? Who wrote that?
That's Anthony Peake,
right?
And people can find him on the internet as well. Quite
you buy
easily.
that on Amazon or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think he's done about 6 or 7, 8 books now.
Yeah, he actually started a discussion group. I think it was to kind of get people to discuss some of the ideas in his book, and I just think it's kind of progressed from there. There are people who come now who have never read the book but just want to talk about stuff.
Okay. So my first kind of question to you, this programme we've called Faith Matters, but my question is, does faith really matter in today's world, or has matter, if you like, trounced faith, in the sense that scientific discoveries and advancements and progress have they made faith redundant?
I think our philosopher should take that question first.
Pass the buck, yeah. Martin.
Well, what do we mean by faith? We mean organised religion. Is that what we mean by faith?
No, I think the two things are distinct. I think we'll come to that later. But religion is really, the way I would see it anyway, is a kind of system that kind of contains faith and spirituality. Yeah, Mark.
Can I just say? I mean, I read somewhere that there was a time when when man didn't understand something, he apportioned that to God, the unknown, the ununderstood stuff, whereas the stuff that he knew wasn't God. And basically, as time has progressed, science has explained more and more and more, and as a result of that, God's got smaller and smaller and smaller because there's been less things that he didn't understand. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why, kind of faith has started to matter less.
So really, you're kind of talking about a Judeo-Christian kind of God there,
Yeah.
the kind of classical monotheistic idea of God. You refer to that God as He, and
Yes.
that may well have been shrunk, but
Yeah, I'm not sure that it is a monotheistic sort of philosophy that he's talking about. It could be any culture that believes in a greater power, and that could be multiple deisms out there, or one, or something else. But
most
something
of us
out
come
there.
from a Christian
But most of us in this country, and that's changing.
have that in our background.
Have that in our background, that there's a single God somewhere that you have a name for that. But yeah, it doesn't have to be a single God. It's just some higher power. And if you go back into distant history, you would probably find that the cultures of the days 2,000, 10,000 years ago would be believing in all kinds of things. And they did, didn't they? I mean, our own ancestors, the Saxons and so on, had lots of different beliefs.
So has God, this idea of God, has it shrunk, or has in a sense it got bigger?
No, I think it's shrunk, hasn't it?
You think it has shrunk?
I think it has shrunk. I think that as you say, the advent of the materialistic philosophy that comes along with science, it's almost as if there's now a switch to, we have to not believe anything until all the data is in, okay? So we're perpetually now not prepared to run with anything or build any kind of philosophy, which I don't think is very human, really. I think that we do need a philosophy or a way of living, but I would argue that I personally, I don't want the off-the-peg beliefs of organised religion anymore. But I do think that there is a shrinkage in the culture back to knowing what we know and knowing what we don't know, and so we are, as a culture and as a people, more suspicious of saying, well, this is supernatural, this is beyond the material, that there must be a physical or a material cause to all these.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing, or is it kind of?
It's a bit of both, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
kind of.
a bit of both.
If we look at the definition of matter a little bit, because I asked you earlier before we started recording, I asked you about whether matter was to do with material things, or was it to do with science, or was it commercialism? Which is it? If I for 1 minute suggest that matter in this argument is about science, what science traditionally tells us, then you could have some people argue that science is merely catching up what the non-scientists have always known, that there is something greater out there that's created all of this, that it is a very spiritual existence that we have. And science has been confounded by many things, trying to prove or disprove the existence of consciousness. And you get 100 years ago, not many people had heard of quantum physics.
Yeah.
But now it's like all the rage.
Yeah.
And it's really, to me, as an amateur in these things, it's kind of an excuse used by scientists to say, well, quantum answers all the unanswerable things. And gradually you come up with something where they can show, by using traditional science, the existence or the non-existence of something that was a mystery before. And so the spiritualists among the people of the world will argue that they're just simply catching up. And one day, science will catch up with everything that people all thought were mumbo-jumbo. So I'm not saying that that's necessarily my belief,
But can I just jump
yeah,
in? But that's in certain broad issues of the spiritual. I think in other matters of religion, there's certainly things now, I think, that a lot of people who are more materialistically minded or more modern just will completely reject outright. But the central kernels of religion, that maybe that we have souls and that they go on, or that there is a creator, or that there is more in heaven and earth, then science could potentially catch up with those elements, I think.
Okay, and what are we going to replace this with, do you think?
Replace religion, the role that religion has given?
I think it's inquiry, isn't it? I mean, I think one of the things that modern spirituality, kind of people have got a confidence now to question things, whereas possibly generations ago you just accepted the explanations, especially that the church gave. Whereas now we have a confidence where we'll question things, we'll put things to the test, we'll reject things if we don't, if we personally don't feel that they fit with our belief system.
And I think that things like consciousness research, neurology, quantum physics, what they can ultimately reveal is more expansive ideas about our place in the cosmos that go beyond the material. And I think that before all that data is in, as I said before, you can already start to sort of suppose where it's going to lead and build a philosophy and wonder and mystery as we go in that direction.
Okay, I'm going to draw it to a close now. We go to our commercial break, and join us after the break. Welcome back to Faith Matters and to our guests from the Open Minds group. When we were talking in the previous part, I was speaking about faith and religion, which I see as distinct things. Faith is about trust and about believing in something that you can't see, putting your trust in something, which is ostensibly good. And religion is a system within which that becomes contained. And at its best, I suppose, faith and religion, so that kind of belief in something better, in a God, if you like, and religious systems at their best have kind of promoted human values such as love and hope and forgiveness, which we need. And if God is shrinking, and if kind of religion is on the way out, where do we get our values from, and how do we sustain them?
I think we could start by going back several thousand years and say, where did we get our values from then, before any established religion was in place? There was, as I said before the break, we probably had a multi-theism sort of culture if you go back many thousands of years. But there was no really established religion of the masses. But they had values. And those values, I think, were based on humans respecting other humans, bringing up families, having children, and showing just some sort of kindness and caring attitude towards your fellow man. So I don't think there's a lack of principles and values, or a benefit of principles and values simply because there is or isn't any religion, any established religion. So the shrinking of, let's say, religion, if that's part of what we're talking about, I don't think is a real problem. It might even be, some would argue, a benefit. Faith, I think, exists independently. We all have something we believe in. And
well, we say, don't we, keep the faith is a
absolutely.
Kind of, I don't know if that's an Irish friend say that to me. I don't know if it's an Irish expression. But
do they mean stay in a particular religious denomination?
They don't mean that.
They don't mean that.
No.
They mean just stay positive and believe.
But it suggests it's an effort,
yeah,
it? And it's worth having, and that it's an effort. Keep the faith. Don't lose faith, because then, you know, you potentially you get negative about life, and I see faith as a trust that life is good, life is worthwhile, life is meaningful, and I think it's, for me, without religion, it's like a hard-won, constant, personal search to do with, you know, experience, self-reflection, of course, reading, investigation.
So that is an effort. There's some effort involved in that.
Yeah, and I think it's that for me is much more valuable than taking these off the peg beliefs of religion. It's purely about my relationship with my life and the world, and that, coming from a Christian background, that feels so much more vital to me. Whereas I think in my upbringing it was very second-hand and sort of alienating in a way. It was just something I was just supposed to go along with. As regards the question, where are we now going to get our morality and our ethics? I think that again, it's back to science in a way, which is the evidence of what actually works, what makes us happy, what makes a society run better. And I think that you've got things like psychology or sociology and things that actually study.
So academic disciplines you're talking about.
It's empirical, really.
Yeah.
And the word empirical, the root of empirical means from experience,
yeah.
rather than from some dusty old book or from what went before. You know, this is what you do. This is how we do it, whether it works well or not. With things like psychology and things like that, we're looking at what does actually work, what does actually make us happy.
And we have been quite brutal in the past, you know, and I don't really think that, religion has possibly kind of shaped our morality. I think we've lived through some very brutal times. We've had wars. Religious wars. You know, we've had things like the Spanish Inquisition, where people were basically, you know, kind of beaten and tortured into submission of a certain belief system. So
we've had that with politics as well, and political ideologies.
Yeah, but your initial question was, you know, where would we be, you know, without our faith? What would shape our moral, you know, kind of values in society? And I'm just saying, I don't think that religion or faith has possibly done that. I think mankind has matured over the generations, and every now and then you will get somebody who will stand up and say, this is wrong. You know, it's wrong that we kind of shove children up chimneys and down the pit. You know, they should be in school, they should be, you know, educated. That isn't necessarily out of...
I mean, well, hang on a minute. I mean, in the sorry to interrupt you there, Mark, but in the UK, it could be argued that, you know, you're talking about social change that came about, say, in the 18th and 19th century. It could be argued that came off the back of the kind of Wesleyan Methodist movement. And, you know, even Neil Kinnock, who is self-declared atheist, said that the British Labour movement and the trade union movement owed far more to Methodism than it did to Marxism. So there's a kind of root there in kind of Christianity.
Well, I agree. But like you say, there you've got Wesley. I mean, it was him that was at the forefront of that. I'm just looking at, you know, kind of the general church throughout history doesn't seem to really, well, for me, you know, kind of my ideas doesn't seem to have shaped our morality, but more kind of bashed it, you know, bashed us over the head with it, really, to a certain degree.
And it doesn't seem an organic outgrowth, these mass religions. Let's talk about Christianity, for example. It doesn't seem to have, it literally didn't originate from the population of Europe. It came from the Middle East.
Yeah, it's an Eastern religion.
Yeah. So, and I think there's always this fear of that's come along with Christianity, which is, you know, if you don't instill this in kids, they're going to be like these barbaric little animals, you know. And one, I'm not sure if that's true. Two, you could put another philosophy or sense of morality in children. It doesn't have to be this off the peg Christian one. And I think that there has been this fear that's come along, which is you've got to get this in, you've got to get them baptized, or they don't go to heaven. So there's almost like this fear of human nature, in a sense.
there's a whole dogma associated with religion. I think there is with any established religion. I mean, I can speak for Christianity fairly well, and what I would say is that, I mean, I was brought up as a Christian in an established Christian religion in this country, and so my whole family. I'm one of 12 kids. And we were marched down to the church every Sunday, and we said our prayers, and we received communion, and we said our confessions and asked for forgiveness. And we all went back being told that makes us feel better.
Yeah.
And it didn't change the way we behaved in between those events. We behaved in the way our families and our friends and our neighbours and relatives encouraged us to behave. Yeah. We kind of learned the behaviours from those people. I can see how people's values can be shaped by what you learn about Christianity or religion. I can see that. I can see how some people go to an extreme where they would see only those values, and they wouldn't have any of their own that they would draw from normal life. I think that's a bad thing. I think that we should all be able to think about our values and ground them in things that are not to do with something that has been created many thousands of years ago in a very different culture from our own, and then just continue to have a mantra around those things.
I would, you know, as a clergy person myself, you know, it may surprise you to hear me say that I agree with a lot of what you've said. And I think, I mean, I'd be interested to know what your take on this is. I think there's a distinction between what I would call the way of Jesus, the way of the person of Jesus, and the way that you can see distilled in the Gospels, in the four Gospels in particular, the way of Jesus, and in the history of many of the people who followed Jesus and the way of Jesus. There's a distinction there between that and this institutional religion that has grown up and which we now call Christianity, that many people have a problem with. I mean, would you go along with me with that?
These guys will just let me just carry on where I left, but on the subject of Jesus, because Jesus, whether people believe that there was really a character named Jesus or not, the characterization of Jesus, which we read about, is actually one that is used in terms of defining our values. Because how many times you hear people say, what would Jesus do if they're looking for the right thing to do? Yeah. They
have it on their wrists, actually.
They don't say, what would our religious leader say or do? In the case of Catholics, the Pope or the Archbishop of Canterbury. They don't say, what would they do? They say, what would Jesus do?
But if you look at Jesus, you know, the context of which, you know, when he was alive, for me, you've got a guy there that seems to be kind of moving against the mainstream religion. Or the mainstream. I mean,
he was a figure on the edge.
Yeah, of course he was. Yeah,
They put him to death.
Yeah,
they did.
Yeah, and you know, you kind of. You had an established, I won't say church, but you had an established religious format, and he seemed to do everything, you know, that went against that. A lot of people who, in the end, had him put to death. But what you see is, you know, kind of the idea was he died on the cross, and the Holy of Holies was.
I'm gonna have to. I know you're in full flow, but we're coming to the end of this part, and we're back after the break. Welcome back to Faith Matters and to the Open Minds group. Before the break, Mark, we were talking about Jesus. Just recap what we were saying about. What were you saying about Jesus?
Well, I was just basically saying that, you know, he seemed to constantly be moving against the established religion of his day. You know, by preaching on the Sabbath and stuff like that, and associating with, you know, tax collectors
and sinners.
Yeah, and
like us.
Yeah, and I just think that, you know, kind of when he died on the cross, you had the Holy of Holies was rent in two. Now, I wouldn't class myself as a Christian now, but, you know, back in the day when I did go to church, that was the invitation for all to enter into, you know, the Holy of Holies. But I feel that over, you know, kind of the decades, well, not over the centuries, that Holy of Holies has been stitched back up again, and we've got the church as it is today, and you've still got to go via the priest or the, you know,
the intermediary.
Yeah. And I feel that Jesus was trying to create something totally revolutionary. But I think, like I say, he was put to death, and we've kind of got a similar thing now that we had
that he was railing against in his time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But if we believe everything that's in the New Testament of the Bible, you would also believe that it was destiny. That if Jesus wasn't put to death by the establishment, none of it would be believed. It wouldn't have fulfilled any prophecies.
No, he would just have been another.
He would just have been another nice guy who actually said the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So you then sort of think to yourself, was it all planned? Was it predestined? And if it wasn't, then why did it all happen? And what's the Bible all about anyway?
So it's very confusing.
It's very confusing. Again, I go back to the point I made before the break, which is that people often, Christians particularly, I think, would often use the comparison with Jesus to decide how they should act in a certain dilemma when they have a challenging question to deal with. What would Jesus do? And it's almost like it's a mythical Jesus. It's like it forces them to reevaluate their own self, their own value, their own principles in life.
But you're comparing yourself to somebody who is divine or semi-divine, and is that really helpful?
Well, that's right. But you know, you get some people might just choose to use Ronnie Barker. And what would Ronnie Barker do in a case like this? Just someone that they admire.
Yeah, the mind boggles.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. But actually, you know, sometimes Ronnie Barker would come up with better ideas than Jesus maybe in this. Is that, am I allowed to say
quite
that?
A claim. It's quite a claim.
It's quite a claim. But more seriously, I think people will choose a hero, if you like, someone or some figure to model their own behaviour. Jesus probably is used to model behaviour more than most, whether he was real or not real.
Okay, I'm just taking you back to what you were saying about the Bible. Is interesting. What about paradox? I'll just throw that in. Where does, you know, you were talking about, you know, or you were alluding to the sort of perhaps the contradictions that appear in the Bible. You know, what about, do we have to live in a universe where everything is kind of clearly defined and set, or is there a place for paradox?
I'd say there's a place for mystery and wonder. I don't know about the value of paradox. I think, you know, what Ed was saying before, that was sounding paradoxical in the tenets of Christianity. For me, growing up in Christianity, they were just confusing, beguiling, alienating. It wasn't something that I could engage with. So I think that the lack of the value of paradox would be that I couldn't engage with it. It was just something that was almost there to bamboozle me and make sure I would go along with the program. It was like, you know, you can't get your head around this. You can't get your head around the Trinity. Now do as you're told. That was the message.
But some people need that, don't they? Some people need direction when there's doubt and confusion, and some people thrive on that. I you know, even in my professional life, I've come across really clever, intelligent, scientifically based engineers who need absolute clarity.
Yeah.
They can't deal with ambiguity. They can't deal with something which is giving them a choice. They need clarity. They need to know what's happening next.
Yeah,
and someone defines that for them. And then they work within those parameters.
That's like a person that prefers to think linear or think in programs and yeah. So
I mean, from my perspective, you know, again, you know, as a committed Christian, and not just a kind of cultural Christian, if you like, is that I believe I see that my faith, my belief, does have a place for ambiguity, and for paradox.
Is that not really just like kind of, you know, you say about paradox? For me, I just wonder if it's like that ambiguity. It's just like kind of knocking a square peg into a round hole. You're just trying to make something fit. You know, for argument's sake, you know, you've got the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill. and yet we know that God ordered, you know, kind of all the Israelites to go into the promised land and kill every man, woman and child. And people will say, well, that's just a mystery, or that's a paradox, we don't know the mind of God. And I just think that that's just somehow just jamming something home when it's really possibly got flaws in it. And unfortunately,
Well, I think what I'm saying is that I'm uncomfortable with that.
Right.
And I don't understand it. But my faith, I'm okay with the fact that I don't understand it. Does that make sense?
Would you not? The thing is, what I would say to you is, you know, and I think that's the thing with the group, is we would examine that, you know, openly and honestly,
Absolutely,
and with the confidence.
And the church should be doing that.
But the thing is, if the conclusion that you come to is probably one that goes against your initial faith, what do you do with that then? Because if, let's say, well, we think, well, actually, when God told those Israelites to kill, then he was going against the Ten Commandments. What do we do with that?
Well, I'd like to believe that this group that we're part of, that's been meeting for how long? 4, 5, 6 years?
5 years.
Has not had someone in the group who's not been able to deal with someone challenging their deep-rooted beliefs.
Has that happened in the group?
But I was going to say, I'd like to believe that it hasn't happened, but I'm absolutely sure that one or two have come along to go away again and never come back, perhaps for other reasons, but perhaps because they felt it was just too challenging to their deep-rooted beliefs. And, you know, they may not be religious beliefs, but it may be beliefs about life and science and the universe, but because we challenge each other, it may be too much for some. So going back to the paradox question, I think there's a place for paradox, but only for those who can deal with it without it challenging their deep-rooted beliefs and knocking them. You know, people could go away feeling really disturbed if those deep-rooted beliefs are challenged in this way. Or even though none of us are genuinely challenging their beliefs, we're simply
just having an
up a debate.
discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it's having that. I mean, that is the, you know, as the group suggests, it's about it's an open minds group, you know. And if someone has, you know, kind of a closed mind on things, then possibly, you know, they may not enjoy the experience. But it's about being able to open up the can of worms and let it be a mess and let it, you know, kind of. And we may not come to any conclusions, and we may leave at the end of the afternoon not knowing really what we believe.
I was just going to say, I don't think we've ever come to a conclusion. I think conclusion is just
a fixed conclusion.
But I believe that we all go away better people by a smaller or larger amount, depending on what we've heard on that day. We go away as being better people. We go away understanding a little bit more that other people don't necessarily follow the logic we've come through to get to where we are. And I think the debate around the paradox, therefore, is very, very good.
Well, I think that interests me because, you know, coming back to Jesus, it always, it's like that Sunday school thing. You know, the answer is always Jesus, you know. Going back to Jesus, that actually was his mode of teaching. It was a rabbinical mode of teaching. It wasn't the kind of, the model that we have today where somebody stands at the front and tells people how to think and what to think at worst. The way Jesus would do it would be to do it like this, and obviously not in a TV studio, but to sit around and
a lot more organic and he'd just sit and start talking, and people would just probably
which you still see today in certain types of synagogues and in some madrasas in Islam.
I think it connects everybody a great deal more to their beliefs or their faith or their philosophy, to actually talk about it and share about it and reflect about it, you know.
Okay, huge. We've got a couple of minutes before we come to our break, and I just want to take us back to, I mean, when we were talking about values, you seem to be talking about, Ed, about an idealistic, ideal, kind of utopian, kind of pre-religious society, you know. But those people were fighting, weren't they? They were killing one another.
I think people have always fought, but for very different motives throughout the ages and throughout the continent. So different cultures will fight over different things that they value, that they feel others may destroy.
So religion hasn't caused wars per se, in that sense. Not religion isn't to blame for everything.
I think dare I say, some would argue that the leaders of certain religions in the world have been responsible for or brought about the consequences of war and conflict in the world.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that there's something in some of these religions that makes them useful to such, you know, malevolent behaviour, which is, as I said before, there is this lack of building a philosophy for yourself. So it makes the masses who are involved in a religion potentially easier to be led.
So it's kind of like power-hungry people hijacking
Control.
a belief system in
Control.
order to control others.
I think, you know, you could argue also that where you have people of varying degrees of intellect and independence, ability to deal with or not deal with paradox and confusion, that control of the right kind is probably desired. You know, even ancient cultures that were seen as being positive cultures, caring type cultures, you could see still the elders, for example, of those cultures in tribes being positively...
Okay, after the break, we're going to have a break now. When we come back, we're going to talk about fundamentalism, rise of fundamentalism. Welcome back to Faith Matters. I was going to say Open Minds then, but because we've got the Open Minds group with us today on Faith Matters, we've been talking about all kinds of issues, and want to kind of bring us now to the subject of the rise of religious fundamentalism. Over these last few days, we've seen the siege in Sydney and the terrible massacre of the school children in Pakistan, both linked to kind of Islamic fundamentalism, but we know that fundamentalism, religious fundamentalism, is on the rise, you know, in all the major world religions. What do you think has led to this?
Well, going back to your earlier question about the rise of materialism and science and the decline of importance of religion, and I suppose at least in the West, I think it's you've got the rise of fundamentalism because it's feeling embattled, and I think that it's drawing the wagons and trying to look stronger than it is. So I think it's trying to survive.
Oh, what is?
The ideologies of these are ideologies that are threatened. This is my take, and I think that that's why you've now got fundamentalism. They feel like they are embattled, therefore they are. I think it's a response to that. They feel threatened, and I think quite often it obviously draws huge, strong opinions, and I think that the best way to treat it is actually not to fight fire with fire, because you're going to fuel it. I think our biggest hope with fundamentalism, if it isn't deemed a problem, is to play the long game and be patient, and because I think that the more we attack it, the more they circle the wagons, and the more important they feel it is their fight or their fundamentalism.
That's easy to say when we're sitting here, not being abused,
No, I accept that.
murdered,
I accept that.
slaughtered
Yeah.
by people in masks. I think you know, you would have people watching us say these things and thinking, no, that's a load of rubbish. You're not there. You're not among all this. I think, though, if we just stick to the point of what has brought fundamentalism into the world, I don't think there's anything new about fundamentalism. I think fundamentalism has existed as a philosophy, at the very least, for centuries, for millennia. I think people would argue that the Roman culture was fundamental in the way they believed. They had some very strong beliefs, and people who disagreed with those beliefs were put to death. And you know, you can look back at any big culture over time, and you will see fundamentalism at play. I think what we're seeing now, though, is fundamentalism at play in a world where technology connects us to what's going on, just like that. And so we're sitting here debating it when it's happening in real time.
But I think the threat is overrated. I think it's awful in the areas in which, you know, people are falling victims to it. But I do think that we live in such a modern, you know, varied world that these are pockets of problems. I think I don't see it.
But if we weren't so connected as we are today, to the people out there, you know, you can be talking to someone in the middle of the war zone on your mobile phone. If we weren't so connected, we wouldn't know about it, and we'd be getting on with our own problems. And I do question whether dealing only with your own problems is a better thing. You know, you will have people argue that wherever there's suffering anywhere on the planet, we should be concerned, and we should do what we can.
Can I? You just said something that you think it's overrated.
I think the threat. I think the worry, the concern.
Well, I mean, what has to happen? I mean, I think we've had this discussion before. You know, kind of. You've got September the 11th. You've got the 7/7 bombings. You know, are you saying that the fear of that happening again? And that, you know, that is in like kind of Western countries. It's going on a daily basis in, you know, Iraq, in Afghanistan, you know, and I actually think we're desensitized to it. We can open up the paper. We can open up the paper and we can see a funeral party. You know, a bomb went off and 78 people were killed. You know, and you're saying that you think that the fear of it is overrated. I think we're becoming desensitized to it, and I think that fear is actually ebbing away. It's only when it happens possibly on our own soil or on, you know, countries that we can relate to, like Australia, like the States, that we suddenly start to think, oh my God, you know, what's going on?
But the question is, what do we do about it? And I think that in terms of needing to do something about it, I don't see it as urgent as that we have to do something. We have to fight fire with fire. I don't think it's the best way to deal with it, because I think you just get. I think you're pulling the knot tighter, and I think if we try and engage with them and just carry on, either, you know, it sounds patronizing, but being a good example and living our own lives in a non-fundamental way, as most of the world is, I predict that this problem will eventually die down. But I think that the more we fight it, I think it's just fueling that fire.
I mean, some people would say that was very naive.
Yeah,
I would probably.
I think myself. I think it is.
So what should we do then? My view is be patient, play the long game, and don't become militant in opposition of it. That's my view. So
how many casualties will you have along the way?
So what is to be done then?
I don't know. I'm not saying I have an answer, but what I'm saying is, hang on, how many casualties, if we play the long game, that is, how many casualties?
How many casualties do we have? You know, there's always been terrorism for a long time. There's always been issues.
Yeah.
It's been going on. Why is it our issue as British people as well?
It's suddenly our issue as individuals because we know about it. When we didn't, it was not our issue. When we didn't know that there were thousands of people being slaughtered across the Middle East 20, 30, 40 years ago by the then regimes. Because we didn't know about that.
Yeah, exactly.
We didn't do anything.
Well, actually,
we didn't sit here and debate about it.
I think, Ed, it was you who said it earlier that, you know, in the Christian history, we have, you know, periods in Christian history where where Christians, you know, you talk about the conflict between the Sunnis and the Shia, where we did exactly the same thing in the years around the Reformation.
We've
had it recently, and we've had it recently in Northern Ireland, on a smaller scale.
I don't want to pick my words in the right way, but we evolved out of it. We changed. We grew out of it. We didn't need anybody saving us from this fundamentalism.
Interestingly, the solution, let's hope that the solution in Northern Ireland remains a solution, was not born out of violence. It was born out of people on opposite sides
saying enough is enough.
Saying enough is enough, and believing that. And okay, you will still get pockets of individuals and small groups of individuals who don't like that. But the majority now have said enough is enough, and they've kind of put down their arms and said that's it. So,
and in certain cases have become friends, you know, as in
indeed,
Martin McGuinness and Ian Paisley.
I think tentative friends, I think, in some cases, but certainly people have not forgotten, but they've forgiven to a degree, the past so that they can all move on together. I think that we have, the fundamentalism we talk about today that was happening in the news in the last couple of days seems to us far more extreme than anything we've experienced, far more outside of our control, far more of something which you can't negotiate. But if you go back to the worst times in Northern Ireland, you would argue that there was no negotiation possible.
Yeah.
The fundamentalism that was going on was as severe as it could be. So what was it that changed that?
I would say that, kind of what you talked about at the start of this, kind of what went on in Pakistan yesterday is totally on a different scale.
Well, they're saying, that's true, but they're
than
saying
what went on in Northern Ireland.
They're saying that that could be the watershed moment. One hopes it is, that in that, particularly in Pakistan,
enough is enough.
Enough. That may well be the one thing where people say, this is completely beyond the pale, and of course it is. And okay, we're now winding down, coming to the end of our programme. It's been really great having you with us. Just let's just end on a note of hope. What brings hope to the world?
Communication, education, learning about one another, learning about other cultures and options, and just learning about what is our potential.
I think because I sincerely believe that most people in the world actually want to do the right thing for their families and their friends, that we still have hope that will spread and we'll listen better because of that belief.
Great to see you all. Join us on Faith Matters next week.